Why is it that some of us say we trust our intuition, we can hear that inner voice, whereas other people try to override any semblance of intuitive thought and they try to behave purely rationally, constructing thoughts and logic to make any decision? Some of us can hear our inner voice, if you believe such a thing exists, and it helps with making decisions. If you believe you have an inner voice, and if you can hear the inner voice that you believe in, it can really help with decision making. But not everybody can hear it, and not everyone believes they have an inner voice that they can listen to. But here's the thing. We are complex beings. We do have our brain, which helps us rationalize decisions, but we do have a deeper part of ourselves that communicates to us at a more subconscious level, a higher form of intelligence. And it is a gift, a skill. It's a good thing to be able to hear that, or at least to be able to communicate with a part of you that knows you better than you know yourself. But people dislearn how to hear their inner voice. It's just the way society brings you up, including family upbringing, because so many things in our upbringing, so many things in our life, in a way, train us to drown out our ability to hear our inner voice, our ability to hear our subconscious, our ability to be in tune with our instincts. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that people need their needs to be met above yours, and they try to get you to help get their needs met. And maybe they are in a position of power over you, maybe a family, somebody in an authority position over you, could even be a job. You learn to listen to other people more than yourself, and it becomes a bad habit. But if you suppress that inner voice long enough, if you suppress the true you long enough, then you reach a point where you no longer know how to hear it. It doesn't mean it stops trying to communicate with you. It just means you've just learned how to listen to it. You've just learned how to decipher what it's telling you. And when you live in a world with so much external influence, you replace the voice that you should be listening to with everyone else's voice. Chaos, just this mix of noise, which doesn't really set you in any specific direction that suits you. But let's say you are in tune with yourself. Let's say you are able to sink in with your inner self, your higher intelligence, your subconscious, however you want to put it. The inner voice, that part of you that you would ideally be able to hear, decipher, it's not really an audible voice per se. It can be. But sometimes when you get these insights about things that are good for you, about the next decision you should make, the next steps you should take in your life, sometimes it feels more like a download from the universe, where it feels like it's almost like somebody threw something at you and it just kind of sank in your head or in your chest. It doesn't really feel like you thought the thought, but rather the thought emerged into you. And if you're sensitive, if you have a high level of sensitivity, it's very noticeable. And it's almost like you're having a conversation with these downloads that you don't know where they're coming from. And if you think about it, if you try to overthink it, you might suspect that you're creating these thoughts through your own mind, but actually you're receiving these thoughts through your higher intelligence, through your subconscious. But so many people try to live their whole life being purely rational, purely trying to weigh the pros and cons on a very rational basis. They try to drown out any semblance of instinct, intuition, any feeling they try to drown all that out when it comes to living their lives, making decisions, and all that. But these people also tend to suffer from anxiety attacks, other symptoms, maybe irritable bowel syndrome, depression. They live a life feeling like there's this impending doom about to just swamp over them. They get other illnesses, sometimes quite severe ones. When you ignore your inner voice long enough and you try to substitute that with what you think everybody else wants from you, you try to live your life in a way that you think other people want you to live, then you're not being true to yourself. You're not in sync with who you really are. And you just become more and more detached, more and more straight off from your path. And sometimes, once you're helplessly lost, even if you don't realize it, things have to get a lot worse before they can get any better. And that's usually where you have to fall off a cliff, metaphorically speaking. Something has to go really bad, at which point you instigate radical change in your life. And even though you don't realize it, the radical change that you're implementing in your life, in a way, is trying to recalibrate you, showing you're on some new path where you feel more resonance. But the thing is, if you would have followed your inner voice from the beginning, then you could have found your path of resonance without having experienced such drama, chaos, misery, and the need for radical change. But our inner voice, there's a lot of value to that. It's a lot of who we really are, what we really are made of. Our inner voice speaks a language, and it understands the deepest things about ourselves. But it doesn't always mean that you should listen to your instincts and impulses without questioning it. Because if you're in a bad mood, if you're in a dark space, if you're in a negative mindset, and you get ideas in that space, then sometimes if you're in that kind of emotional turmoil space and then you're getting ideas, then sometimes your inner voice is speaking to you under the influence of that dark space, of your shadow self. And what that means is, if you act upon the impulses and instincts and ideas and thoughts that are being generated at your most kind of deepest core, when you're in that negative emotional space, then that would just bring upon more negative turmoil. So the important thing is to learn to listen to your inner voice and understand the influence which you're under when you hear it. Because if you're in a very negative space, then that's probably something that would just perpetuate your negativity. But if you're in a more positive, steady, leveled space, then listening to the inner voice is probably more reliable. But it's good to be able to listen to yourself at all times, but it's also good to be able to discern what influence are you under emotionally. Because in a way, we're always having a conversation with ourselves. And it's not always our rational mind having a conversation with our rational mind, but sometimes it's our mind just trying to interpret and decipher what the true us is telling us, so it can then make the best decisions for us. And it really is a gift. It really is something special to be able to be sensitive enough to be able to discern, the part of you that knows you better than you know you, and being able to discern and decipher that part of you communicating to you and making decisions on the trust that sometimes you can't always work out why certain decisions will be to your benefit in the long run, but you just feel that it's the right thing, and so you follow that impulse. And it really comes down to this whole concept where, you do live in two different universes. each and every one of us lives in two different universes. You have the outer world, everything that you see when you look outwards. Other people, the world, space, time, you see all that. But then you also have your internal world. The part of you that knows everything about you, your life experience, who you are, your wants, your likes, your dislikes. The part of you that can amalgamate everything that's important to you, everything that's relevant to you, in such a way where it can tell you what your next logical step is that suits you best given who you are. That internal part of you, your internal universe. It's when you can kind of relax in that and just not judge it. Don't be afraid of being misled. Don't be afraid of not being able to hear. Just trust, find that good feeling place, and being able to communicate with yourself, listen to yourself. And then maybe you can interpret what your inner voice is telling yourself, whether through sensations, images, voices, feelings. People get inspiration through different ways. Some people say they hear things, other people say they get inspired. It's just this thought inspiration, the sense of knowing, and so on. So a lot of times when you're up against some of the most important decisions of your life, you don't always want to rush into those decisions. Ponder them, contemplate them, set them aside. And when you find yourself in this good feeling place, maybe you're feeling good in this trusting place. Maybe that feeling can last a few minutes, hours, days. And when you start getting inspired off the back of being in that good feeling place long enough, and you start feeling like you know what your next decision should be, your next move should be, then that's probably the right thing to do. You're probably on the right path. Thanks for watching.